In this video, I'm going to be walking you through how to create a gauge swatch for a crochet project. Now, typically most patterns will give you a gauge based over a 10 centimeter area. So when you're creating your swatch, you want to aim to create it a little bit bigger than 10 centimeters so that you can get an accurate gauge swatch within that 10 centimeter square area. Create a chain that is measuring a little bit longer than 10 centimeters, and then using the stitch pattern as indicated in your crochet pattern, create a gauge swatch in the same stitch pattern and the same yarn and hook size as is initially indicated. Once you've created your square, we're going to use either a tape measure or a gauge ruler to measure how many stitches wide our 10 centimeter area is giving us and how many rows high our 10 centimeter area has given us. From this, we can work out if our gauge is tighter or looser than the designer's gauge when they created the pattern, and therefore we can adjust, if needed, the hook size to create a tighter fabric or a looser fabric. In this way that we can ensure we get the best possible fit, particularly if we're making crochet garments. Some homewares and accessories gauge is less important. It doesn't matter so much if your tension is a little bit tighter or a little bit looser than the designer's, but particularly if you're wanting to get a good fit or making something with negative ease, it's really important to match your gauge as closely as possible to the designer's gauge. The other thing to bear in mind is to check whether or not you're required to measure the gauge swatch before or after blocking. You may be required to block the gauge swatch first to give you an accurate measurement. If after measuring you find you have more stitches across 10 centimeters or more rows across 10 centimeters high than the designer has in their gauge, then you need to use a larger hook size to create a looser fabric. If you find that you have fewer stitches than the designer has, you need to go down half a hook size or a whole hook size and make another gauge swatch in order to create a tighter fabric. If you're working a pattern that requires you to work in the round rather than back and forth in rows, it'd be more accurate to create a gauge swatch that is circular, and so typically you would work the first couple of rounds in the pattern as described and then check your measurements against the measurements given for the pattern worked in the round to, in the same way, see if you need to adjust your hook size to accurately match the gauge swatch to the designer's.